First tax break in the history. Then David spoke to the men who stood by him and say, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is the uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him in this manner, saying, so shall it be done for the man who kills him. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. You know, one time I was holding a Bible here and I was reading and everybody took pictures of me. Everyone, I mean, hundreds of pictures. And only then I realized it was Precious Moments Bible. I was holding a pink Bible. Eliab's anger was aroused against David, and he said, why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. And David said, what have I done now? And I'm like a little boy. Again, you accuse me for something? And is there not a cause? Then he turned from his towards another and said the same thing. And these people answered him, and as the first one did. Now when the swords which David spoke were heard, the words which David were heard, they reported them to Saul. Then he sent for him, and David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Now you can imagine Saul was a tall guy. Proud. He's the king. And a young boy is coming to him. I'm gonna go. And you can imagine what he feels, yeah? And watch this. And Saul is kind of looking, probably he was... It's pretty embarrassing, you know? And probably David was... Then, I'm just going all the way to verse 42. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for it was only a youth, ruddy and good looking. So the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Are you ready, Steve?
Yes. David.
And then David said to the Philistines, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel.
You interrupted.
The God of Israel.
He lost his place.
Any day now.
The last day.
Whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, and all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all these assemblies shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. So it was when the Philistines arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran towards the army to meet the Philistines, that David put his hand... Wait a minute. I didn't get to that point yet. Then David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword and drew it out of his sheath and killed him and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that, how do you think they saw it? Remember?
Lifted it up.
Wow. Oh, that's a good one.
He's not quite dead
And when
yet.
the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Now the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley. I mean, this is the part where I always laugh. I mean, they see him dead. Now everybody, woo! And they run all the way to the end of the valley. I mean, they don't even go further away. It was like, all right, they're gone. Crazy. Okay, so now watch this. And the wounded of the Philistines fell along the road to Sharaim, even as far as Gad and Ekron. Then the children of Israel returned from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem. But he put his armor in his tent. When Saul saw David going out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of his army, "Abner, whose son is this youth?" And Abner said, "As your soul lives, O king, I do not know." So the king said, "Inquire whose son is this youth, this young man is." Then, as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, "Whose son are you, young man?" So David answered, "I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite." And you know what? The Bible goes on and says, so the women sang as they danced and said, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000." You know, I had to. What you need to understand, who sang it?
The women. He was hot.
You see? You women. You need to understand something. We men, next to you women, are almost nothing.
Yeah.
We bring ourselves almost to the foolishness, the fullest level. Am I right?
Yes.
It is a hormone called testosterone that drives us nuts.
Yeah.
Now you must understand that for a male king to hear that the women, it's one thing when the old people says, Saul killed them the 1,000 and David in the 10,000. Who cares? But when the young ladies, Saul killed 1,000, but David killed him in the 10,000. Now you can imagine what it is for a king to hear such a thing, that the ladies are saying that. And that is the beginning of a long love-hate relationship story that culminated, of course, a few chapters later in chapter 24 in En-Gedi. But folks, David did not kill Saul. In fact, who killed Saul?
God.
Saul came Saul. He fell on his own sword and killed himself. So folks, I don't know if you have a Goliath in your life, and I don't know if you think that Goliath is that big and that strong, but I'm telling you that God is able.
Amen.
And God is able, with less power than you may even think he needs, to struck and to kill and to destroy and to eliminate any giant in your life.
Amen.
You understand that?
Yes.
And sometimes you can feel surrounded with troubles. Sometimes you can feel the youngest, you can feel so helpless. Sometimes the world comes right almost to swallow you. But I'm telling you, if you just hold on to the promises of God in this book, and if you remember that your fame and your glory is not from the world, that it's from the Lord. And if you give thanks to the Lord and do his things in his name, you will triumph over